Good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing this morning? Ms. Voss, let the record show that we started this primary budget workshop on April 24th at 9:07 a.m. Mr. Administrator, how you doing this morning?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Give us the good news, man.
All right. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, good morning. This is your first workshop and one of many steps in your budget process where we receive your direction in the development of the county's annual budget. I wasn't planning on cleaning up what I feel was a pretty misleading headline in this morning's newspaper, but I guess it's that time of year, and I should probably start off with that. What you have before you is not a proposed budget. That will come to you, as you know, Commissioners, in July, but a necessary starting place for your, again, very deliberate and thorough budget deliberations and the development of this budget. As far as property tax hike language used, and I won't spend much time on this, but let me just say that I don't recall any headlines about the county slashing property taxes when leaving the millage rate constant over the years and years and years of constant millage rates while property tax values were plummeting during the Great Recession and the slow economic recovery. That said, Commissioners, as you know, ours is a year-long process. In fact, it's a multi-year process, our budget process, which aligns the budget process with the strategic priorities of the board and includes continuous feedback, evaluation, and the execution of policies and projects and carrying out both the day-to-day responsibilities of the county government as well as continuously working toward the long-term vision of the county. Commissioners, although we are very early in the process, again, not the last time you'll hear those words from me today, before you is a tentatively balanced preliminary budget, which again reflects a tremendous amount of policy direction received prior to today, and of course makes necessary assumptions at this point relative to revenues and expenditures, which, as you all know and have become very familiar with, will be refined greatly throughout this process. It's important to note that at this point in the process, we do not have emphasis added estimated official estimates of property values from our property appraiser's office. We do not yet have our constitutional officers' budgets submitted. We don't even have a full analysis of our own departmental budget requests. Again, as the board is familiar, you'll have all of that information as the funnel of the budget process sort of narrows before you in June. What we do have to present to you today at this point in the process, and I'll hit just the broad strokes on this, is a preliminary budget, again as a starting place, which is balanced with no increase in the millage rate. It contemplates modest but welcomed growth in revenues due to a slowly improving economy, and we'll talk a little bit more about that today. However, you will see that it reflects the same level of scrutiny and the same level of effort to realize cost efficiencies and cost avoidance through our various systematic internal organizational efforts, which frankly we engage in regardless of economic fluctuations, as well as the leveraging of resources through working closely with our community partners. While the tentative budget is very conservative, the growth that we anticipate, Commissioners, importantly, will allow us to build back reserves drawn down throughout the recession and the slow economic recovery, so that we could avoid any significant increases to the millage rates, again, over the periods of time that the property values plummeted over the most recent years in our budget balancing history here. This growth, in addition, will allow us to begin to restore capital budgets to an amount necessary to ensure proper maintenance and avoid borrowing. It provides us the ability to continue to retire debt aggressively. And that modest growth, again, will allow us to use a small amount of fund balance in the budget, which, along with our debt, we hope to be able to reduce to zero in the very near future. In all, Commissioners, the tentative budget reflects just 2 new FTEs in the county government organization, not including the constitutional officers, which I should note at this very early stage in the budget have worked diligently with us through this process, and we can't thank them enough. And again, that's something you'll hear me say more throughout this process. But the 2 positions on the county side, again, and just hitting the broad strokes under the county government, one is a much-needed park attendant at the Appalachia Regional Park. The other is a stormwater engineer to work on those hundreds of septic to sewer conversions currently being undertaken by the county. Again, Commissioners, you can tell by the broad strokes that this tentative preliminary budget is, again, very conservative. It aligns very closely with the board's top priorities, and it places prudent emphasis on laying a strong foundation for the county's fiscal future. Before you today, Commissioners, you have an overview item and several budget discussion items on which we'll seek your guidance for further refinement in this budget development process for FY19. Before I hand it off to Alan to go into more detail on the budget overview item, I should note that today's workshop is scheduled from 9 to 3. We do not anticipating needing near that amount of time, Commissioners. However, Alan informs me that there's nothing that he'd rather do than to discuss the budget in detail for that period of time. But he also is very well aware that he's probably the only one who would like to do that. Mr. Chairman, I'm prepared now to hand it off to Alan to get into the budget overview, but I wanted to check in with you and see if you're ready for that.
Yes, we are. Hold on, I got Commissioner Deloge in queue to speak.
I mean, traditionally we take a minute just on the front end before we get into it and just talk a little bit about our feelings. Not to belabor the point that our administrator pointed out, but and I had a conversation with Jeff this morning. I mean, I think we need to make sure we look at the forest for the trees here. I mean, when I came in here 12 years ago when Commissioner Daly and I got sworn in, the budget was approaching $300 million, 285, 290 from memory, or at least that was the proposed budget. After today, we will be at 250, give or take. I'm trying to remember exactly. But the point is, we are providing a heck of a lot more services 12 years later in an environment we have, a huge reduction in the size and scope of the budget. We have less employees. And so we're effectively doing more with less. I think people get wrapped around the axle sometimes if they look at a year-to-year basis. And I think it's important to look at a much broader, bigger picture. And I think we can be real proud of what we've done and we continue to do. And I'll say it, like I say every year, if the economy starts to heat up like it did years ago, we do not need to fall in the same trap, I think, which was before, which was ride the curve up to the upside. And really, in fairness, in hindsight, they probably should have tapped the brakes a little bit. So I'll say that again. As we go forward, I want to make sure we don't just continue to kind of, take the uptick. But I'm proud of the work we've done. I think the budget looks good. And I want to make sure people know, because I'm sure my phone's going to light up with, what do you think you're doing? You're overtly raising our taxes. And I think you got to step back for a minute and say that's really not the picture that we're painting here. So thank you.
Commissioner Lilly.
Thank you. I'll just be real quick and to echo something Commissioner Deloge often says, which is in reality, this budget also reflects a lot of what we've heard all year long from the citizens. A huge emphasis on assisting the Sheriff's Department in crime fighting. We know the crime numbers in our community have been high in the last several years, and so this is a really partnership in that regard. Another is the stormwater and springs protection, all the water projects that we have going that people want in this community. We have more sustainability projects, and they're not things that are growing in huge numbers either, but they're policies that we want to emphasize because people have asked for them. So when the reality is like, oh, sometimes this also costs some money, and not a lot, honestly. That's just important for taxpayers to remember that what they have wanted, we are trying to respond to, and I think very efficiently. So just thanks for the reality checks always, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner Lindley. Preliminary budget, as it's written up, is a very good document. I appreciate the hard work the staff has put into it. Look forward to going throughout the day, as I'm sure the rest of our commissioners are as well. Probably one of the most exciting parts for me, in particular, is the Miccosukee sense of place that we talked about. That was very exciting to see the possibilities out there, and it could maybe even form a model for the other places like Fort Braden and Woodville that we have in Leon County that can be developed even more into having their sense of places as well. So I'm excited about what staff has done there. Look forward to hearing all about it. Any more comments from commissioners? Seeing none, we'll get started. Alan?
Commissioners, as you see on the screen, I'm going to go through a brief budget overview and give a little more details on the numbers that are in front of you today. Following that, we've outlined items 2 through 9 will be the individual budget discussion items, which we'll turn back to once the overview is done. So format is, we'll give you the little title slide, show where you were at. As way of background, commissioners, to emphasize what the administrator had said, our budgets are interdependent year to year. We do not budget in isolation 1 year at a time. What you do this year will clearly impact next year, and what you did for the last several years impacted this year. So it's a continuity. Overall, if we go back and we look at our approach to budgeting and financial planning, it's been deliberate and reasoned throughout. So if you go back to the recession, which was a little time ago, but it is part of an ongoing approach to our philosophy with budgeting, we maintained the millage rate when values declined and passed along on the property tax savings. You move forward through that story, and as we came out of the recession, the county tackled and the board dealt with some long-term fiscal issues relating to stormwater and transportation and got those funds on track. Coming into now, where we're having a little better growth now, and we're seeing some turns in the economy, our efforts are to reduce that use of fund balance in the budget and to continue to increase that capital transfer. Right now, from the peak of the recession to here, we've cut that use of fund balance in half, and we've actually increased that transfer from 0 when we were at the peak of the recession to hopefully $5 million here. So again, all of that's reflected, and we have outside validation, as you can see from the quotes on the screen, from Moody's, Fitch, et cetera, that you see the credit position of Leon County is very good, the financial position of the county is very strong, and those aren't our words, those are the words of Moody's this January, and that's based on that deliberate and reasoned approach that we've had to our financial plan. If we move through just very high level, the administrator touched on a couple of these, but again, the tentatively balance is merely where we are with our assumptions right now. No increase in the millage rate. Again, we still don't have values. We still don't have a lot of information to make the final recommendations to you, but this is that point in the process. Modest growth, we'll talk about a little later in some of our other taxes. One thing we wanted to point out very clearly is we set aside $1 million in reserve based on the direction the board has given regarding the CRA negotiations. Those dollars will be set aside. If the referendum passes, will be available next year to offset the impact. If the referendum fails, then we'd have those dollars to continue to emphasize elimination using that fund balance or increasing that capital transfer yet further. Again, part of that prudent long-term financial planning. And lastly, we just emphasize on the screen, we only have 2 positions as relates to the county at this point. That doesn't count the constitutionals. Okay. One thing I wanted to bring to your attention, if I got the clicker working, cost avoidance and savings. Commissioners, this is a very deliberate approach that occurs throughout the year, and Vince touched on it briefly, but I want to spend a few more minutes talking you through this. It's not only during the formal budget process. We have specific and targeted practices throughout the organization. We have leads listening sessions where we bring in scores of outside customers and users to provide insight into what we're doing and provide feedback on where we might do things more efficiently. We have our cross-departmental action teams where we pull together a range of managers and line staff to get together and vet ideas and concept that might be find process improvements throughout the county, and we do that on a regular basis. We have our I-Squared program, which you've all seen, the recognition of the dollars saved throughout your annual employee breakfast, where we go through and we highlight the millions of dollars that employees identified in savings. And lastly, as you'll see in some of the discussion items today, we value our partners where we can leverage them to also do cost savings and avoidances. We continuously empower employees to do this on a daily and consistent basis and not once a year right prior to budget. Right now, before we come forward to talk to you about anything related to new fees, costs, etc., we've identified at least $1.3 million prior to even walking into today in cost avoidance and cost savings. That builds upon the millions in prior years as well, but this year alone, $1.3 million has been realized before we walked in here today.
Before you leave that page, Alan, just real quick, are those recurring savings?
Yeah, those are savings that we realized walking right in here today, sir, that are not needed to be asked for in the budget because we were able to identify them before we came here today.
And they will be, that's 1.3 million recurring, right?
It's all recurring, about 500 recurring and 800 was one time.
Thank you.
Chairman, could I put a footnote on this part to come back to later, please?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so going back there. So if we go now, and this is your page 5, table 1, very preliminarily on the changes in the overall revenues of the county. We've assumed at this point in the process, and again, we're repeating ourselves on a few things, but these are just our preliminary estimates based on a 5% growth in property taxes, or property values, excuse me, holding the millage rate constant. We generate about $6.2 million. OMB's finalizing the rest of the revenues on the page. When you look at our general revenues, there are a lot of consumption-based taxes, sales taxes, et cetera. We're thinking about $1.2 million overall in there. That's 3 to 5% depending on the individual revenue stream. Our interest allocation, we've restored a good portion of our fund balances at this point. You saw in the materials previously that we've recovered the majority of our funds, or the vast majority of our funds that we laid out for Hurricane Hermine. And we've recovered about 8 of 10 million, so that will give us back some of those balances. We'll start earning more interest. And gas taxes, very nominal increase, probably between 1.5 and 2 at most. Again, these are consumption-based taxes. We don't see any real change at this point in time in behavior. The price per gallon and the price to is not changing significantly, and people continue to drive. So overall, nominal growth, more tied to population than anything. If we move to, with the magic of the clicker, our expenditure table, first, I do want to point out in here that in OMB we have one adding machine, and they ran out of the tape before they got to finish totaling the table. So we did have to make one change in the table. You'll see on the transfer to capital in your materials in the hard copy, it said $500,000. It's actually $1 million. And you'll see on that Microsoft conversion, it says 0.07 here. In your materials, it's at 0.57. So we pointed this out on the briefings. Merely, it was just an adding machine issue, and we just realigned it appropriately.
That occurred in Leon County?
No, not really, sir. I'm not sure where that happened, but I'm going to make sure these guys have a lot of tape next year.
Yes, sir.
So if we go through, and this is high level, and we talked about some of the briefing to try to break down the numbers a little differently, and I'm going to just deviate from the slide for a second. So the numbers I'm going to give you are not on the slide, but they add up. It takes us about $6 million a year, commissioners, to open the doors of county government. That takes in consideration a number of the items you have on here, from our contracts to our maintenance agreements to just the cost of the FRS system and healthcare increases, all of that to open the doors next year, including the constitutional officers, because they're part of that equation. It's around $6 million, and we get nothing, I don't want to say get anything new, but that's basically your baseline budget. When you go on top of that, there's about $2.3 million, give or take, that are devoted to, as the Commissioner Lindley pointed out, we're supporting, of course, the second of the third year of the sheriff in terms of the position request, and working towards the replacement of his very, very aged fleet. That's going to add about $1 million, give or take. We're working on final numbers. In addition, we said it a number of times now, we're looking to increase the transfer to our capital projects fund by $1 million. Last year it was $4 million. We wanted to get it to $5 million. Long-term, commissioners, we'd like to get that number up in the $8 million range on a recurring basis to deal with those maintenance needs and the long-term replenishment, so we have dollars available to do capital projects. As the administrator said, by doing that, we can avoid borrowing and we can avoid drawing down our reserves further. If you go through the individual lines, you'll see the rest of the specifics. We can talk about it in any detail the board would like, but you should see a number of them are aligned for strategic initiatives of the commission that are in the adopted strategic plan. And lastly, we mentioned this briefly at the beginning, you have the reduced CR payment of RA payment that you'll be getting those materials back to you that the board and the city have already agreed to. We'll save about $1 million next year. You'll see at the very top of the item, we're setting that aside in a reserve, and it'll be available if needed for next year pending the passage or not passage of the referendum. Lastly, commissioners, to kind of wrap up, just to emphasize again, and you can see the specifics in front of you, we are very early in the budget process. We're in April. The budget office is finalizing the review and recommendations of the budgets, including the capital improvement programs. May 1st, we will get the formal submissions of the constitutional officers. We've been working with them closely, but we don't have formal or final numbers yet. June 1st, we will get the first official estimate from the property appraiser's office. That will follow with your budget work-off on June 19th. And I should have put on the slide, and I apologize, the final values will not come until July 1st from the property appraiser. And then if there are any substantive changes at that point in time, we'd bring that back to you in your July board meeting or a workshop if necessary. With that, commissioners, we would just seek your acceptance of this very preliminary budget overview.
Motion for staff recommendation. Option 1 has been moved by Commissioner Deloge, seconded by Commissioner Lindley. I have Commissioner Dozier in queue to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate that overview, Mr. County Administrator Allen, and the comments, Commissioner Deloge and Lindley, leading into our discussion here. I won't repeat what you've said, but I agree that we are in a position to show that we've had fiscal responsibility for years. A lot of communities did not go into the recession in the same position we did, from having the ability to maintain the tax rate even though values were falling so much, and we cut, Mr. County Administrator, was it over 60 million?
Yes.
During the recession? So we were able to make those cuts and withstand the budget shortfalls during that time. And now coming out of it, I think dealing with the debt, other things, makes us capable of dealing with the next crisis. We know this isn't the last time that we're going to see a recession or some other impact like the homestead exemption. To me, it also indicates a responsible approach to future projects. Consolidated dispatch. We've seen the Emergency Operations Center, other things like that. We couldn't have done that had we not had the money available. So I agree that we're in the right position here, but I will say, and something I mentioned in briefing, coming into every budget, and Commissioner Maddox and I coming in at the same time, we came in right at the beginning of the recession and when we were really starting to feel the impacts. Seeing the spreadsheet, we have to have a balanced budget, and this is very preliminary. It may help in our next budget workshop, Ms. County Administrator. I would love to see a chart or something like that showing how much we have changed in the property values. We've had a level millage, throughout this time, but our values have changed dramatically. And we should say 5% growth is great. We're seeing the real estate market really pick up. This is good community-wide. So I think we're helping the economic development by leaving the millage rate level, but we are also adding our capacity modestly, but to make sure that we are prepared for whatever comes in the future and do those projects that keep our community moving forward. So I think just seeing a visual might help us show and understand better where we've been in the last 8 years or so with that one level millage rate. And I just wondered if there was any appetite for that. We've not seen that. We've talked about it a lot, but we've not seen a visual of that. And it is hard to wrap your mind around for some folks who don't see the budget every year, why we see some increases, but that this is just getting us back to, and as you said, Commissioner Dozier, not where we were before. I completely agree. There may be a point in the near future, I hope, or in the long-term future, where we're going to hit that point and say, okay, now we can start dropping the rate back. For now, we are just still recuperating from the impact of the recession. So I'd love to see some other way of getting into that dialogue in the future. But I also want to say there are a lot of items in this. I know we'll talk about it, Mr. Chair, where those cost savings are pretty dramatic. Looking at things creatively, like the training center for the sheriffs, we'll talk about that. Once again, we see our staff looking for ways to avoid costs and use existing resources, and I really appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Proctor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. I want to thank our staff for outstanding work. The ease with which they present their materials, their command over budgeting processes really exemplifies the complexities of what they know and how well they marshal their understandings. Simplified, for my understanding, is excellent. I had several math teachers who could never simplify those complex things that even I could understand, but our budgeting county staff does those things, and I'm appreciative. A couple of people mentioned persons who, when they came in, and today is the first time that I have ever gone through the budgeting process, and Commissioner Jane Sauls is not here. So this is a little spooky, sort of like for me. After 21 of these things, and you've always seen your partner or someone came in with you, that's a little, it makes you think that, you know, things evolve. I think that what we have is a beautiful opportunity and option, and I want to go back to the 1.3 million new dollars that Alan said that we've come into this morning. That coupled with the $7.92 million that we have. Now this is hard to produce. We're not the biggest county. We don't have the most money. I want to pass it out, Commissioner. But we have efficiencies that we have attained. And I think that when you're looking at efficiencies, well, Moody said it best. Moody said it best. And that's what Moody does. They look at your organization and they monitor your efficiencies. And certainly, my opinion is not expert, but Moody's is. I wanted to share thus, feeling that we have this flush of money, new monies, new revenue. It's an excellent opportunity that as we move forward and we receive everybody else's asks and wants and desires, that we would ponder doing a pay equity review, and that our budget would actually allow for the balancing of equal pay for gender in our organization. I've talked with the county administrator about this. He felt very, very good about it. And it was so interesting that, Vince, your comments mirrored the guy on 60 Minutes. He was equally astounded. He was a do-goody type guy, wanted to do the right thing, was flabbergasted when the numbers in the reviews continued to expose that, notwithstanding his commitment to rightness of equal pay, the data, he was drowning in the reality that what he thought and what was didn't exist. But I was pleased to note your optimism that we don't have much of a problem in Leon. And so it was with the star interviewee in 60 Minutes expose. I like for our budget to not be balanced on the backs of women if they have been factored to receive less money. And I think that a balanced budget should, in terms of a definition, should reflect a balanced pay scale. And if there's not balance in the pay scale of gender, then the numbers that come out even Steven. And by law, we have to, by state law, present and secure a balanced budget. And I don't want to get over into Attorney Teela's lane and Ms. Riggins' lane, but I think that the state law requires us to put forth a balanced budget. Is that accurate? Okay, good. Okay, so what we have to do, we're mandated to do. But what I'm asking for us to consider, we're not mandated to do. And one of the terms that came out, Commissioner Lindley, was this word unconscious bias. And that was an interesting term because it does not place specific, it doesn't place burden of responsibility. It's just unconscious. I want to make sure that we're not unconscious, and I'm asking for, and I've shared with you a memorandum seeking an ordinance that we would adopt to equalize our gender pay. If there's the absence of will among us, and it's something that we think that it's something the voters should decide, then in the alternative, I would ask this commission to place this matter in front of Leon County's voters and to allow them to decide whether or not our county can be exemplary and be a county that, to my awareness, and we have the national president here, we have the national lawyer here. I'm unaware of any county that have put their ordinance to effectuate, to stabilize, and to give continuity to the talk of equal pay and put it in law. And I think that because we're a great place, we're a diverse board, we are a very diverse board relative to many in the country, that we have an opportunity this cycle to be a model for the nation. We're the 12th most literate community in the United States. It ought to reflect in how we set rules and standards for recognizing women. And the emotional part of how I feel, I won't talk about that part, but I put some of this in writing for you to share. And if there are questions that anyone has of me, I'm prepared this morning, Mr. Chairman, to try and answer anything that anybody want to ask me about this. But as we move forward, I appreciate the board's endorsement last week that our staff would look into these things to see what disparity may exist, and hopefully that we're not just looking, but there's commitment to equalize our pay, and that we create parity, and that we eliminate disparity here in the county of Leon. I want to feel good about that. So those are concerns that I have. And when we get to, Mr. Chairman, you going down straight 1, 2, 3, 4? Or are we just going to block vote this and just get out of here?
No, we're going to go straight through it.
Okay. And I'd like to talk a little bit when we get to item number 7. But as an opening situation, commissioners, I like to carry forth and incorporate the notion with this new money on the table that this is a great time to treat the women of our community and our county with equal pay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have no more commissioners in queue to speak, or any other commissioners. I'm sorry. Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Proctor, I appreciate your comments regarding Jane Sauls. I wouldn't pretend to fill her shoes, but I'm honored and humbled to sit in her seat as a giant of leadership on the west and southern ends of our county. And I know I'm jumping ahead just a little bit, but I do want to commend the LIFE initiative, a livable infrastructure for everyone, because many of my neighbors, including myself, live on these unimproved, non-paved roads. And it's comforting to know that emergency services as well as police and fire would be allowed to access these very small pockets of population, but nonetheless very important neighborhoods. And then secondly, the ingenuity in reducing the ambulance fees by 24% to bring a cost savings of $800,000 back into the county, I think is pretty impressive work. Now I'm looking at Chief Abrams. I'm sure that he is tightening the belt over there as well, but I think it's extremely great initiative for us to look at decreasing those fees for the residents of Leon County. Thanks.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Vice Chair. Any more commissioners in queue would like to speak? I have none in queue. All right, we'll move right along. Item number 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just before moving on to your budget discussion items very quickly, Commissioner Proctor raised a very important issue. I didn't want to go by it too fast, and I'm sure we can come back to it later in the board's discussion. But as he mentioned, we are in that process of that very important gender equity pay study based on the board's direction at your last meeting. That study is ongoing. We'll be bringing it back to you and in time in your budget process before the June workshops if there is any need to deal with that at all. But I do have to say no new money in terms of the 1.3. That's just cost avoidance. Those are not any dollars realized in a balanced budget or surplus or anything like that. But we obviously will have plenty of time for the board to address any such issues as we move forward through the budget development process.
Mr. You have to tell us that in plain language because we pounce on new money right now.
Thanks. Commissioners, very quickly, as I move into the budget discussion items, Commissioners, you've all been briefed on these items. We do have staff that is going to be joining us here at the table, the lead staff who'll be able to answer questions that you might have. I'm going to do just the short version of each of these items, Commissioners. However, they're all very scalable. I'll ask the lead staff to chime in and add some detail, but just know that we're prepared to either do presentations or simply respond to any questions that you might have. And in many cases, the quick overview, given how well briefed you all are on these items, may suffice. Commissioners, the budget discussion item before you, the first one is the EMS rate reduction and hardship policy modifications. This budget discussion item recommends a 24% reduction in the most commonly charged emergency services medical fees to bring EMS rates in line with industry standards and to provide cost savings to our EMS customers. The item also recommends, as noted, modifying the county's hardship policy to provide greater relief to those customers most in need of financial assistance. So why is this item before you, Commissioners, in the budget process? Well, our fees, while they are in line with the broad fees charged by EMS providers, they are on the higher end of those being charged in the state, and we recognize that. This is something that we look at, and we are very sensitive. It's a core practice of ours to be sensitive relative to taxpayers, and we also recognize that EMS fees also tend to hit those most in need disproportionately. I should also say our fees are where they are and in need of a correction, if you will, primarily due to how we offset our EMS fees. All EMS providers offset their fees to some extent. EMS doesn't pay for itself, so to speak. And we use a very small, I should note, property tax millage rate of 0.5, as you all know. In some services, dedicate 4 mills to EMS services. So our corresponding our property tax rate to support that is very, very low. We are not recommending at this point increasing that. However, the fee reduction that is proposed would amount to about a $264 reduction to the most common EMS bills. It is, as Commissioner Jackson noted, about an $800,000 revenue reduction to us. We are intending to deal with that revenue reduction through a use of the revenue strategies that are before you, including the use of EMS fund balance, the use of additional Medicaid dollars, decreasing the indirect cost charged to EMS, and to redirect the trauma center dollars currently included in the budget and redirect those to support this reduction. With that, as a broad overview, I'd like to pause for a moment and ask Chief Abrams if he has anything to add, and then, Mr. Chairman, I'll come to you for any questions that the board might have.
Thank you, Vince. I think it's important to point out that in this item, we aren't contemplating any service level reductions. This is, we presented our departmental budget outside of that process. We're able to make this recommendation based on the financial strategies that are outlined in this document without impacting the service level that we recommend. And that service level that we believe has, that the community has desires and wants, and that exceptional level of service that's delivered every day. Also importantly, I think, is the financial hardship policy piece of this. We see more and more people requesting that as they have difficulty paying those bills, and it's something that certainly sticks out to our staff as a need to move forward with. And we can't miss the efficiency that our team has had in there. It's in the item. The level of efficiency that we have when we compare other jurisdictions is much greater than most places. We're getting a lot more effective and efficient services than most organizations are that are similar to us. And there are a number of those efficiencies that are in there that from the past which help us to do this thing.
On point, real quick, Commissioner Lindley.
Could I just ask you to explain the hardship policy changes in a little bit more detail?
Sure. So currently you have a hardship policy that if someone has an outstanding EMS bill, they can request for that fee to be waived, but they have to meet a very stringent guideline, which is based on the federal poverty level. So if you are an individual, one person, and you owed us money for your ambulance transport, that scale is right about $12,100. So if you applied currently and you made $1 over that, you don't get any. You have to pay the fee. It's 100% of the poverty level. So you have to match that poverty level, be either at it or below, in order to get any reduction. What we proposed is more of a sliding scale to give people that maybe a little bit over an additional reduction.
From 100 to 200%.
From one, right.
So it's not that rigid, $1 over and you're out of luck.
That's correct. That's correct. So we would look at their income up to 200% of the poverty level. They would receive some level of discount.
Right. I'm really glad to hear about this, as well as the overall. I mean, because I hear a lot from our folks in the unincorporated areas about the cost of emergency services, and so this is a great find for all of us and great for our citizens, I think. Thank you.
Okay, I have Commissioner Delaley.
There you go.
Commissioner Daly, Commissioner DeLoach, Commissioner Proctor, and you to speak. Just real quick, this does remind me, though, when I was running for office in 2010, I was in a neighborhood, a motorhome neighborhood, walking the neighborhood, and a young, she was an older lady, passed out as I was talking to the folks at that motorhome. And they said, we need to call the ambulance. And she was totally against calling the ambulance because she did not want to pay that bill. She could not afford the bill. She felt like if she got an ambulance that the world was going to end. And so things like this, believe it or not, does help the burden on those who don't have the finance, who don't have the insurance, who just can't handle it. And so I appreciate the fact that the staff is looking at these types of things to put Leon County in a place where folks won't be afraid to call an ambulance to come pick them up because of the cost. Thankfully, she was okay. But what if she wasn't? These types of things do help. So, Commissioner Daly, you have.
Thank you, Vince. Great presentation on the reductions, and Chief, y'all run a great great shop. The only thing I would recommend is make sure that you keep an ambulance at the football stadium when Commissioner Maddox passes out during the alumni football game, because he's getting on up there. Lots of ice and Tylenol. He still thinks that he's a young buck out there at the Florida State football team. I'll go ahead and make the recommendation for staff recommendation for option number 1 and option number 2.
Number 1 and 2 have been moved by Commissioner Daly, seconded by Commissioner Deloge. I have Commissioner Deloge, Commissioner Proctor, Commissioner Dozier in queue to speak. Commissioner Deloge, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On point, but maybe we can bring it up later. I know we've danced around with this with limited success, the whole community paramedic program. I really, I think to myself, I don't know how many of y'all are familiar, we've done this talk before, but I mean, these guys are doing a spectacular job within the parameters that they're given, but we're not bending the curve like I'm sure we can. There's a small group of people that end up riding the ambulances, go into our hospitals, and they treat it like a revolving door, and they run up huge bills, and there's got to be a better way to do this. The billing system and the current way it's all laid out doesn't make it very workable for us, but I think it would be worth maybe another discussion at a different time, bringing back an agenda item to just revisit it. And so, because I think there's a real play here in getting out, and at some point I think people are going to start to realize if you're not trying to prevent some of these things, you're just, continuing to tread water. Then we've got a very small, finite number of people in our community that literally are in the hospital every week that are riding, I think. I mean, there's a small group of people that we can identify that run millions of dollars worth of charges up. And if we can figure out a way to get in front of that and potentially, get somebody in those homes, and I know so far from what I understand, the hospitals and some of the HMOs in the areas are not real receptive to the idea, mostly because there's just no way to bill for it. It means stepping out and really incurring an expense that otherwise there's no associated revenue for it. So the model doesn't work real well. But I think we just need to take a step back. I really, in my heart, think that it'd be worth a separate discussion down the road. So I'll just throw that out, and maybe we can circle back and bring an agenda. I don't know if it's appropriate outside of this motion to maybe ask if we could have an agenda item, but I think it's worth a separate discussion.
I'll entertain it after we take out the motion.
Thank you, Mr.
Unless Commissioner Daly wants to add. No, let's keep it clean.
Separate.
Take it up
that'd
after.
be fine. Thank you.
Let's take it up after. Commissioner Proctor?
Chairman, does the EMS make money or Leon County does it lose money? What's the net outcome?
The funding, and I don't want to say make or lose money, the funding is about 60% with the fees and 40% property tax revenue from the MSTU. So if fees were supposed to cover 100%, then it's losing money if you look at it that way. But our revenue mix is 60% fees, give or take, 40% property tax.
So we subsidize it. With the amount of money that we're writing off, would the write-off actually make us whole if we recovered it?
The write-off, the amount of money we write off annually,
yep,
in terms of what people don't pay? Absolutely, Commissioner. We would, if everybody paid the full amount that we billed, we would not need a property tax. But you have to understand that a good portion of that are people who are indigent and don't have the means to pay.
Right.
Right, and our system, as we were just saying over here, Commissioner, is very much consistent with how the state treats throughout. When we look throughout, people are using property taxes to subsidize these systems. We're not unique.
On page 5 in this item, is this the $200,000 in new Medicaid reimbursement from the state? Is that a $200,000 amount? And then what traditionally we sent to TMH for the last several years for trauma care, that's an additional $200,000. Is that actually $400,000 that we're combining to send to EMS?
Yes, in aggregate there's $800,000. There's 4 components, but yes, they're all, the trauma center money would be new money to EMS. The Medicaid money is additional funds that we are eligible for now. So that are both new money to EMS to offset the fee reduction.
I just want to ask the question, wouldn't the Medicaid money, would it more rightly ought to be programmed for something like bond or neighborhood services versus going to transportation?
These are I'm sorry, Commissioner. These are specifically tied to EMS transports. These are recoverable revenues from the federal government through the state that are specifically tied to transport of EMS.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I have Commissioner Dozier in queue to speak. Commissioner Dozier, you have the floor. On point, can I get on point? Just real quick, the percentages, that 60-40, I don't know that you know this, but where does that put us in line with the rest of the state? Is that about average, or, I mean?
We have more fee revenue, Commissioner. As the Administrator said, we have jurisdictions where we look where there might be up to 4 mils of MSTU revenue going to support their EMS programs. So we're probably a little higher on the fees than the property taxes compared to the rest of the state.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Dozier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Really appreciate this item and the work that's gone into it. I know we'll have more discussion about the trauma center, and that's been an ongoing conversation for a few years with TMH. For this, I think for me, and I'm glad you brought up the hardship policy. We talked about this in briefing, but having a space where people could have a bill that they might be able to pay may actually bring in more revenues for us. People see a very large bill and decide not to pay. They just can't make that. But if it's a reduced amount, we see this in parking fees and other things like that across the country. People are actually more willing to pay a bill that they can accommodate within their budget versus a very large bill that they just set aside. So that may be a unintended consequence of this, that we see a little bit more revenue. But I really do like the sliding scale. Thank you, Chief Ms. County Administrator, for that. I have received calls over the years, from people, and Chairman's right, there are those who don't want to use the service because they are fearful of that bill. But those who have health insurance also are surprised by the bill at times. And so I think this really goes a long way to helping people throughout the county, whatever their capacity is or health insurance status. One question I had, we've been administering EMS for a long time. The improvements have been dramatic. I still have a visual in my mind of the maps that you showed us a few years ago of changing the placement of the vehicles and how you move that around. I think we've really gotten ahead of the curve in that, in a great way compared to a lot of our colleagues around the state and perhaps around the nation. And I also wanted to mention I was in the room in our NACO visit, and Chief, you were on the line looking for other opportunities. Mm-hmm. Was that the community or paramedics program that Commissioner Deloge was mentioning, or was that a different funding source? I couldn't remember.
Yeah, that was specifically talking with them about the community paramedic program.
Okay.
And they had a lot of good to say about it, but again, legislatively, they don't have funding to pay for that. So.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just wanted to bring that point up because you're right, Commissioner Deloge. That is a great program. We've discussed it before, and just as recently as February, the chief was and our staff was looking for other options for funding, but we've got to wait until the federal government decides what they're doing with some of those resources, and I think the grants you were looking at were no longer available. But the staff was very complimentary of our efforts and very constructive in some of their comments, so really appreciated that. I guess the only other comment I have here is that I'm really glad we're doing this study now. This has been a question that I've received over the years, and I'm wondering, Mr. County Administrator, maybe this is to you versus the Chief, are we going to look to reviewing our fee structure every 3-5 years, something of that nature as we go forward? In the back of my mind is the MSTU, the fire service fee. When we get into that discussion in the future, there's a large portion of our fee that goes to Tallahassee Fire Department and others. So, I mean, I think there are ways that we need to get even more creative in the future with this. But reviewing the fees as we go forward on a regular basis might be a good thing to keep in mind. Would you agree, Mr. County Administrator?
Yes, and Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Dozier, part of what we do in our internal year-round efforts is, in addition to looking at sort of our operating costs, is looking at our fees, and I joke a little, but it's true that most of the time we're coming to you, it's not to reduce fees, right? I mean, it's that we're trying to keep pace with our costs. In this case, we also look, again, if it's sort of if we can, we should type of a scenario. In terms of this particular fee, we think that the way we've got it structured moving forward, tying it to 2 times Medicare is going to put a good governor on that. That's a common industry rate, and again, it will provide a good governor for us moving forward. That is opposed to the current fee schedule, with the escalator of which is medical inflation, which is much higher. So we think on this current fee that will be a good governor. But I hear your question and your comment and guidance relative to all of our fees, and it's something that we engage in on an ongoing basis.
Thank you, and that's a really important point. Thank you for the reminder that tying it to, or not tying it to the medical, the cost of medical services in general is a very good thing for us going forward. Well, I really appreciate this item. Took a lot of creative work, and you all doing a great job. And last comment, Mr. Chair, at the Arts Festival this weekend, there was an emergency. Someone had a heart attack, and our EMS team responded, as they always do, very quickly. And I happened to be with some of the volunteers at that time, a young woman whose mother was recognized at one of our Press the Chest events as part of the tennis group that helped save someone. And the conversation that the community members got into at that point, just very appreciative of your efforts, and particularly that training, and that she and her family had gone through it. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to make that comment, and that it's not lost on our community how much effort you go into, even outside of just the day-to-day emergency service we provide. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Dozier. Commissioner Proctor?
Thank you, Chairman. About how much one of these rides costs, ambulance?
So currently, an average bill right now at the ALS1 level is right around $1,100.
$1,100?
Yes, sir.
Oh, no, I didn't mean the fee, the ride in it. That's a lot. No wonder the lady didn't want to catch that ride. I'd have called Uber, cab, or somebody. I'm just saying. Yeah, I still would have called them, just, time. How much does it cost to purchase? It costs more than a Navigator, the new one?
To the cost of an ambulance.
Yeah, the cost of an ambulance. We highlighted this in this item. We did this year start a new program where we are refurbishing ambulances, which resulted in a cost savings to us. But a brand new ambulance is around $220,000 with no equipment in it. I've mentioned to Alan in the past that the cost of a stretcher that goes in the back of the ambulance is about the same as a Honda Civic. It's $24,000 just for that one piece of equipment. So you have to look at more than just the ambulance. There's a lot of equipment that costs a lot of money that's in that vehicle. So,
right, so Mr. Chairman, you'd be really impressive in an ambulance retrofit than a Hummer. So you might want to ride up to the spring game next year in an ambulance.
Don't give any of my friends any ideas, man.
They might do that. All right, put some mags on it, 24. Okay. All right. I think that what Commissioner Dozier was pointing out speaks to these agreements and fire service fees. I feel that some of that we've actually been bullied into and browbeaten and pushed around a little bit. And maybe now is a good time to review those numbers, and with whether or not, and I'm sure that, and I'm saying this, Commissioners daily listening to me, that we need to go back and renegotiate with the city and look at a fair situation. But I feel that we've been largely dictated and told what to do, and we were just pretty much forced. And it also, if you look at how those agreements were leveraged, they were not created in a vacuum, but oftentimes we did this and went with this rate because we wanted something else over in this area to occur. And if you don't do this, then you ain't going to get that. And I think that we have perhaps a new opportunity, I hope that by this time next year, to renegotiate with a realigned mindset in city government, given there will be a new alignment in city government. So that's the hope, and the timing of what Commissioner Dozier is saying, in part, requires our re-looking at, because those agreements, they will sunset, and hopefully with a new aligned government there, it will sunset sooner than later. And finally, Chief Abrams, I was curious, and I think one time we saw among the calls that you all get, and what is help us to understand the volume of calls. I know that when our students go home, I think that the calls go down, but and also the dots. We've seen the dots on a map where the calls are coming from, and whether or not Commissioner Lindley and Commissioner Maddox's districts are just hogging all the calls.
The disbursement of calls remains relatively similar over the past several years. It's the intensity that has gone up. So we've had some years that we've seen as much as 7 to 10% increase in call volume from year to year. Last fiscal year, it was closer to 3%. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
So it's balanced in terms of the calls and where they're coming from.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. I have no more commissioners in queue to speak. I have a motion on the floor, a good motion by Commissioner Daly, seconded by Commissioner Deloge for options 1 and 2, which is staff recommendation, I believe. All those commissioners in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Vice Chair Jackson out of chambers will move to item number 3.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Commissioners, I want to give a lot of credit and acknowledgement to Sheriff Walt McNeil and his staff on this item. I'd like to recognize Chief Folsom and Chief Harrelson, who are in the room, for their work with us, and we give them all the credit in identifying this one, and where this is one of those cost avoidance items that we work so hard on. The budget discussion item before you seeks the board's approval of a proposed partnership with LCSO for the use and improvement of vacant county-owned property on Tyson Road as a law enforcement training facility. Working with LCSO staff, we have identified an opportunity to create new law enforcement classroom space and training facilities utilizing existing resources. The proposed partnership would significantly enhance training opportunities for LCSO personnel, would allow for LCSO to consolidate many of its current training activities to a single location, enhance education and workforce training opportunities for inmates at the Leon County Detention Facility, and importantly, avoid approximately $800,000 in cost to acquire separate property or construct or renovate facilities. The impact to the upcoming budget, again, is $800,000 in cost avoidance, but upon your approval today, we will be working to make this happen. Again, commissioners, on this one, we're just happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Move option 1, Mr. Chairman.
Option 1 has been moved by Commissioner Proctor, seconded by Commissioner Deloge. I have Commissioner Daly, Commissioner Proctor, Commissioner Lindley, Commissioner Deloge in queue to speak. Commissioner Daly, you have the floor.
Support the motion.
Yes, sir. Commissioner Proctor.
Chairman, this is interesting and good, and I guess it's enough property there when the sheriff's out there range practicing shooting, if that occurs there, there's enough space that for people who don't shoot that good, that if the bullet leaves off, across the road, which we have an ordinance, the state has told us bullets can't fly across the road, but if you can't shoot good, it might do just that. But I was wondering, as we looked at this property, Spring Hill Road, where we had the road prison, we had DOT had a parking lot out there, and actually both sides of the road, junky cars, and oil company used to be on that corner. And we talked about this some years ago, acquiring that property, and that right there could be just a tremendous, and would have been a site if they were not shooting, range situation. That would have been a great piece of property right there on Spring Hill Road for such a project. And as the Commissioner Daley, as the city is contemplating a so-called Southside police station headquarters and all like that, that too would be a tremendous, it ought to be an alternative discussion on the old prison and all that stuff that's just dormant. I still think that we ought to look in that property to acquire it, to purpose some service potential there. It's an eyesore. It's on the way to the airport. It's one of the first distractions and impressions that you see about Leon County, Tallahassee, when you come from the airport on Spring Hill Road. And I'm very, very hopeful that as we're looking at this piece of property, how to make it functional, better, useful, all of that, that we also tighten up on Spring Hill Road. That piece of property is begging for somebody to see it and make better use for it. And I just offer that because we've gnawed on this bone before, but nothing has come to fruition from that. And I just had to lift it up as we were making good sense of what to do with this piece of property.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
to address Commissioner Proctor, I called what used to be Ben Pingree up to the table, and I just
I just hope it's the good half.
Just to address your issue on Spring Hill Road, Commissioner Proctor, again, aside from this item, we're currently working toward the acquisition of that property relative to the Spring Hill Road project.
Vince actually highlighted it there. Yeah, absolutely, Commissioners. Oh, I'm sorry.
Before you start.
Yes, sir.
Look, Leon County is all about good health. I think we should all give Ben a hand because what you have done is nothing short of amazing. So I want to let you know that that's pretty awesome. Ben has lost about 90 pounds?
Maybe even a bit more.
Maybe even that's something to be proud of. And so
Vince is right. Well, he really is not half the man he used to be.
Well, I only bring good news then. So of course we're looking. Of course, we're looking at that property, Commissioner, for long-term benefit on the matter that you raised or related. You may recall that we had the direction to look at donations whenever we could do that, or for low-cost acquisition. So that's the guidance that we already have from the IA, but happy to affirm here that, yes, we will look at that property for including what you brought forward here today and the consensus that's here.
Yeah. Great. That should be a part, if nothing else, a part someday.
And Mr. Chairman, as Ben returns to his seat, Alan said if he could continue the cutting with his budget, we would appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Only Alan.
Commissioner Lindley.
Thank you. I just wanted to note two things. One, that we'll be talking about the sheriff's budget separately on the additional staffing and vehicles and so forth. But I love the creativity of the staff and finding this obscure little note about a mosquito pond. So we're going to move it from this new facility. The sheriff's going to use the old facility that was ours, now going to be yours. We're going to move the mosquito pond to the detention center to create an on-site aquaculture program for inmates, which I think is just tremendous because we're always, I think, in the community talking about when inmates are at the detention center, what happens? Do they get any additional skills or training to get themselves geared to get back to life? So I just love this creativity of getting this new program going as well. It's just one couple of lines in our budget item that I just think is worth noting, and that I think as an old reporter, I would have written a sidebar on that, Jeff. So there you are.
Is that like a?
Thanks, staff.
Is that a hint?
Commissioner Lowe's.
Chair, building on what Commissioner Proctor and Commissioner Lindley said, we've got surplus property occasionally like this, and I applaud the creativity too. I think this is great. I'm kind of curious. I know years ago we put together a list of all the surplus property we had in an effort to try and kind of monetize the balance sheet. Are there other things we could do with some of this stuff? I have to believe the city's in the same spot. I have to believe the school board's in the same spot. I have to believe to some lesser degree the Blueprint may even be in this, where they've got property that they have no use for, that they're carrying. And I'm just wondering if there's a possibility that there might be some swapping among different, I know we've had conversations in the past, and maybe formally every year just sit down and say, here's what we have. Does anybody have a use, or at least share those lists? Is that being done, or is it?
It is, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Deloge. As you know, we do once a year. We bring you an item with all that on it, and that was. I think that was it.
It was me
at your direction years ago. But we do. In fact, we just had it about a month ago. I think we had the item on where we inventory all of our property and then identify uses for that, whether it's a governmental use, whether it's affordable housing, or whether it's one that we would recommend to keep in its natural state to deal with stormwater attenuation and those different types of things. But we do that regularly, and once a year we bring you, and we hold very, very little property relative to the
Do we
site.
interact at all with the school board and the city? I guess that's where I was kind of going with this. Yeah.
On occasion, it's really not. I couldn't tell you that they are involved in our process that we do with our inventory, but on occasion we will go back and forth and determine again property that's in use. You'll see that in fact on the next item with the Miccosukee Community Center, where we did that, where that was more of a liability to the school board, and it really became a potential amenity for us to take the Concord School in. So that it's more on a case-by-case basis, but we could look for opportunities to include that.
I guess if it was okay, it might be worth taking that agenda item that we put together and just shoot it to the school board of the city and say, if you have similar lists, might be if there's an appetite for any kind of swapping or trading, and at least then they've got it. They might say, wow, we're planning to expand over here. We didn't realize you had this. And anyway, just a thought. It's all owned by the taxpayer. Let's put it to use. So thanks.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner Deloge. Commissioner Dozier?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know we're straying a little bit from this really great and creative idea. I agree with that. And gentlemen, thank you. Having worked with the sheriff and his folks on a few other issues recently, I really appreciate a wide range of creative community partnerships, not just with Leon County, but with Appalachian Center on mental health and other things that you all are working on. So thank you for that. I think we're really pushing our community forward. On the surplus property, though, I know, Mr. County Administrator, we looked at, you all have been looking at potential new round of surplus property coming from the state. I think we talked about that, and whatever happens in this election year, we're going to have new voices in the mix. And so this may be something we want to wait until next spring to look at. But I think whether it's the state surplus property and or our locally owned public property, it may be in our interest to have a more formal approach to partner with the school board and the city and the universities for that matter, to look at what happens when the surplus buildings come down. I think we've had this conversation before, but I would be interested in the future in making that a more formal invitation to our partners to sit down. And Mr. County Administrator, I think you've started those conversations on the state surplus property. Is that right?
It is, and in fact, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Dozier, we've got an item coming to you that's in the works now. It'll be coming to you at a future upcoming commission meeting, more of a status report on the state surplus property process, but it's one where we could, again, continue to try to dig a little further and identify maybe some policy options when working more closely with our partners on that. We stay closely engaged in that process, but again, it tends to be more on the state's timeline of when they evaluate and make properties available to us.
I appreciate that. I thought you were working on it, and I would be interested in, I won't mix up the motions as the chair directed earlier, but if we could elevate that status report to an agenda item so we could have some more robust conversation about this, kind of get ahead of it in the future, I think that would be in our interest and timely. So thank you for that. And last comment, Commissioner Lindley, I picked up on the aquaculture, or as I'm learning from the oyster ranchers that they're animals, so they call them ranching. I don't know if that would apply to a fish pond, but some really creative ways to look at workforce training while folks are serving time, whether at the detention center or others. And there may be some other programs we could look at in the future. I know the Masonry Association, for example, has a partnership in Sneads, and some of those folks who are trained while they were serving time won a national masonry competition for the skills that they learned and were able to apply when they were released from prison. So I think this is a really great start, and again, the Sheriff's Department is getting really creative with these in partnership, and I really appreciate that.
So I have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Proctor, seconded by Commissioner Deloge. I have Commissioner Proctor in queue to speak, and I have two motions for agenda items to be taken up after this motion is dispensed of. Commissioner Proctor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not that good at math, but some years ago, Commissioner Gary Jordan told me that I didn't have to be good at math, just be able to count to 4. That was important on this desk. And I think that I can count to 3, and I wanted to join this Me Too movement with Commissioner Dozier and Deloge to say that I, too, support the direction of us lifting our surplus property. We ought to have a sit-down. It takes 2 days, 3 days, or whatever conference on this, because if we're looking at parcels which might be of interest to for housing, that may be parcels that are categorized for business development. There may be parcels which our local area universities might hold an interest in. And Jackie Pons was interested in a downtown school, as well as, I think, Senator Mofford. And when the state is letting go of these buildings, downsizing, all these things, that we all have first right of refusal to these properties. We ought to have first right of refusal because first we don't get a fee in lieu of their occupation of our community. We support the same EMS that Chief Abrams was talking about. That's the same EMS that our county sends to every rally. There'll be a rally on Thursday. I'm sure Thursday somebody gets sick, the EMS got to be out there, and all the state buildings, when people get ill, they come to all these buildings. So Leon County deserves first right of refusal for what we give that's not even in the books, not even recorded, and that it can advantage our community in a way that nobody else can move a building. No other community can actually get one of these places on Calhoun Street because you can't move an address just yet. Okay, so that's why. So to Dozier and Deloge's point, Mr. Chairman, a formal process, we ought to get all of it. We really ought to get all of it, and we ought to have a process that when the state abandons or leaves or get rid, that we get to go in there first and clean up. I support this. I hope that we can lift it to the level of at least a 1-day, 2-day discussion. You know, show me yours, I'll show you mine, and let's see if we can make that work for our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Proctor. I have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Proctor, seconded by Commissioner Deloge for option number 1. All those in favor of the motion will indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries without objection. Ms. Voss, show on item number 2 on Commissioner Daley and Commissioner Deloge's motion of option 1, option 2, that also Commissioner Jackson votes in the affirmative, so that would be a 7-0 vote instead of a 6-0 vote. Mr. Attorney, do we have to retake up that vote, or is there anything that we need to do formally to make that?
That's what the chair declares it to be.
Thank you. 7-0 vote. Thank you. I'll have Commissioner Deloge in queue to speak. You want to make that motion now for agenda item?
Community paramedic or
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'd love to have an agenda item brought back at y'all's leisure. I realize this is something we've talked about, and to the degree that we could maybe engage some of the other healthcare providers in the area just from an interest standpoint and have an open discussion about it. And frankly, in my opinion, if there's a way we could start this off really small, I realize doing this on our own is going to be, but maybe if we saw some success, we might be able to work our way through it. But anyway, but if we could have an agenda item brought back, that would be my motion.
Motion been made by Commissioner Deloge, seconded by Commissioner Lindley. Any objection to the motion? Show it is passed. 7-0. Commissioner Dozier?
Mr. Chair, since the county administrator is already planning to bring us back a status report, I don't know if we need a motion on this.
We'll just make it an agenda item.
If you don't mind, Mr.
Sure.
County Administrator,
No
does that
problem.
work? Okay.
Okay.
Thank
All
you,
right,
Mr. Chair.
so it's understanding that it'll be an agenda item instead of a status report. With that being said, we'll move now to item number 4, Mr. Administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This budget workshop item seeks the board acceptance of the Miccosukee Rural Community Sense of Place Plan and approval to establish the Miccosukee Citizens Worker Group to further develop and implement the plan's objectives. It also seeks your approval of a multi-year funding strategy for to implement this board priority. Planning staff has put together a very brief presentation for you and have done, I think you'll agree, some very, very good work on this item. With that, I'll hand it off to Devin.
Good morning, Commissioners. Today we got before you the Miccosukee Rural Community Sense of Place Plan. To get started with this, I know everyone's been out to Miccosukee, but I just want to walk us a little bit through Miccosukee. So the village of Miccosukee, you can kind of see the Calmart in the back. This is the intersection at Veterans Memorial and Cromartie Road. These are some maps just of the first charrette that we had out in the community. We had about 52 citizens show up to that, and this was an education for myself, staff, everyone else about how committed the citizens are to Miccosukee. This is the Concord School site that we have out in Miccosukee, just to kind of put into frame everything that's out in that area. This is also the park with the ball fields in this site. Taking this back a little bit, this goes back to December 2015. I know you're probably thinking it's 2018 now, so that gap, where are we at in that gap? So 2015, the strategic initiative was proposed, and then 2016, this was adopted as a strategic initiative, the Sense of Place study for Miccosukee. And then from October 2016, we did that 3-day workshop I was talking about with about 52 individuals. This was a great experience to see this many folks in the community. We actually have a couple here today here just to hear what's going to happen on this item. It went back from November 2016 to February 2018 for plan development. And now looking back from 15 till now, you're probably asking, where is that? Why is there a gap? Well, there were some opportunities that arose while we were working on this plan with the Leon County School Board to get the land transferred over to Leon County government. We already had some property around that, so this seemed like a good opportunity as we're looking through this to really focus and see what we could do on this whole site. And then March 2018, we have the draft plan that we've got in front of you today for April. From this plan, just a few things to hit. High notes on this is we came up with 4 goals, and each of these goals have a few objectives for each one. So you'll see facilitate community engagement while promoting the identity and history. Objectives you could find under that are establish a Miccosukee Citizens Working Group, and then acknowledge the significance of both the Concord School and Miccosukee School. Looking at goal number 2, communicate land development opportunities and constraints. Something you could see under this as an objective would be provide training and updates on the development and permitting process and regulations. Something we heard from the community that was really important to them while we were out there. Goal 3, you have explore opportunities to enhance community services and objectives. Something you would find under this one would be consolidate the community center and amenities at the Concord School, or explore opportunities to create historical features that represent the Miccosukee Rail Depot. And then moving through the goal 4, you look at improved transportation safety. And these could be stuff like looking at exploring opportunities to increase lighting on road segments or wider shoulders for safety for bicyclists, because we heard that was one of the things in Miccosukee is there's a lot of bicyclists that come out for Spaghetti 100, other things like that, and this would be an opportunity to really make them feel safer about the bikes being on the road. With that, the staff recommendations would be to accept the Miccosukee Rural Community Sense of Place Plan, adopt a multi-year funding strategy, and then direct staff to bring back an agenda item to establish the Miccosukee Working Group as a focus group.
Looks like Commissioner Deloge.
Mr. Vice Chair, can I just comment in to
Sure,
pick up on the piece of the presentation? One last thing we wanted to focus on a little on this, and one we're very excited about the plan in front of you. What we also wanted to just spend a second on is discussing that financial plan that's in your recommendations in front of you. We already have in the budget, as when we acquired the Concord School as part of the budget, we set aside about $250,000 to deal with some initial infrastructure out there. Those dollars are available to it, so obviously a lot of the resources and trying to make that a focal point of the community, but complement that with all the other land and resources out there. In addition to that $250,000, as you'll see in your next agenda or your budget discussion item, we have the LIFE, the Livable Infrastructure for Everybody program. One of the eligible uses in that program are sense of place initiatives in the rural areas outside the urban services area. We've identified about $775,000 of life funds over 4 years towards that. So that puts us over about $1 million in 4 years. And lastly, we're actively working on pursuing a community development block grant, which we've informed the board of previously that would probably be a high priority of us to try to get another $750,000 through that process. And we're going through that process now of vetting different projects for CDB grant funds. So ultimately, if that came through, we'd be upwards of $1.8 million if that was acquired. If not, we would probably be coming back to the board in future budget cycles to identify additional funds to complete the overall sense of place. So just want to share that's what the multi-year funding strategy was, Mr. Vice Chairman and Chairman.
Thank you. I have Commissioner Deloge in queue to speak, Commissioner Potter, Commissioner Dozier. Commissioner Deloge, this is your district, my man, along with me and Commissioner Lindley. But we'll let you take the lead on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank staff for all the work they've done. I want to thank some of the residents for all the work they've done, too. It's been a long time, and this is a beautiful place for our community that oftentimes gets forgotten. I mean, they're tucked away, and they're kind of timeless, and it's a real treasure for our area. So the fact that that many people showed up, and I'm hoping as we go through this, they'll continue to participate and guide this, but it's a great opportunity to take an area of our community and really capitalize on. I think the Concord School thing, for anybody who's ever been out there and played ball, it was always kind of a mismatch because the school district didn't cut their grass at the same schedule we did, so it was clearly that there was no coordination there, and so things like that just make a huge difference. So the staff, my hat's off to you, and for the citizens that came out today, thank you so much for your continued participation, and we look forward to doing great things. And I would happily make the motion to accept staff's recommendation of options 1, 2, and 3.
I'll second that motion. Options 1, 2, and 3 have been made. Motion been made by Commissioner Lowe, seconded by myself. I have Commissioner Protner in queue to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sure these exciting things, and I've been looking through these pages, and one of the areas and concerns, hardships actually, that the growth and development of Miccosukee continues to bring for people indigenous to the area. That we have the rural 1 house on 10 acre rule out there. And I think that we need a relief valve. Many people have gotten older. Circumstances and time and money have changed. And there are a lot of families that have what you might call land rich and money poor. And Doris Malloy notifies us yearly that we owe her some money for the benefit of Leon County and public schools. But as I look at Reverend David Hall, persons from Miccosukee who are here, when I had an opportunity to speak at your church last year, Reverend Hall, I got a chance to get a little earful from the people of Miccosukee who are members of your church out there, way up. Man, I hope that there's a cemetery out there, and I hope that when Gabriel blow the horn, bro, y'all gonna be so far back in the woods. I hope you hear it. And I'm gonna be in the city when Gabriel blow his horn, but he's out there. But one of the struggles that that I gathered is the continuing noose around the necks of families who would like to divest themselves of properties, but they can't do anything but 1 house on 10 acres. And I think that if we're going to be equitable and fair, it's a high standard in the one of the fastest growing states in the nation. We have gone from 4 million people in 1980 to over 20 million people today. And when you do the math, it's more than 800 people per day that move to Florida. And to say that we're requiring 1 home on 10 acres is a high bar. It's an exorbitant bar. 1 house on 10 acres is a standard which exceeds many of the families who've been there for years, and they want to be able to parcel out and to create smaller sites. For years now, Commissioner Jackson, I have tried. Commissioner Sauls has heard my speech 1 trillion times. So, but I have said that one house on 10 acres is a standard that exceeds common people's ability. And I think that we need an escape hatch to allow families that have been out there for 100 years and all like that to not be trapped. And it looks good on paper, and we like to see the moss hanging down on the trees. But a lot of people ain't doing nothing but paying taxes on property that you just ain't got the wherewithal to handle one house on merely 10 acres. It's too much. It's too high. It's too great, y'all. I'm asking Commissioner DeLoge your empathy and consideration for the families who been out there for years. Their parents, grandparents, and got old. They want to do something with this property. But 10 acres per is too high. And I'm asking, and Mr. Duhart, I'm sorry, I remember late Mr. Duhart, who passed, people who used to come to these meetings back in the 90s of not coming anymore. Reverend Hall, who was coming then, is still coming now, other members of the community, that a consideration is given for, 3 acre is much more reasonable, and certainly not over 5 acres or 4, to be given consideration to the development and the character of a place which I don't think would violate the rural character and aspect of one house on 3 acres. I've been begging for it. I'm begging some more. I'm in the beggar's box, and asking you in the batter's box to allow greater flexibility to people who are straining. And they love Miccosukee. They're not trying to disparage and to minimize Miccosukee. Nobody loves it more. It's just that the load of 10 acres for individual lot is greater than these people can carry. And I'm asking the consideration that we move in that direction, one house per 3 acres.
On point, Mr. Chair. I'm betting that this is probably a separate item from this, but I'd certainly be willing to entertain this for a separate agenda to have a discussion about that. I know this has been an ongoing issue, and I know exactly what you're talking about. The people have multiple generations, and there was an ability to divide property, but there were some timelines. I don't remember the specifics, but I'd be happy to readdress that. But it's within the realm of what we're doing here today. It's a separate issue that impacts them. But so why don't we bring that back as an agenda item, and if that's the will of the board, would that be?
Yes,
Mr. Administrator.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I was going to warn Commissioner Proctor that his inner planner was coming out here today, because it's actually, Commissioner Proctor, what you're talking about is a stated objective in the plan, objective 2.3 in this, and upon your acceptance today, we'll continue to pursue this. I can't tell you what the results will be in terms of the densities and intensities, but specifically an evaluation of the land use zoning and the removal of the residential preservation zoning category where it makes sense to facilitate higher densities and small-scale commercial is something that was identified in this plan, and upon your approval today, we'll come back to you. Yeah,
Commissioner Pratt, you still have...
Well, no, I was shocked when he said that my inner planning. I don't plan nothing. He's real. I think I'm trying to catch up. Yeah. I'm not a planner.
Commissioner Dozier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, Mr. County Administrator, I was going to ask about the residential preservation overlay. I was glad to see that addressed in the item. I don't think it gets to your broader question, Commissioner Proctor, about the 1 to 10, and that may be in a land use conversation on the comp plan. We have not agreed 100% on that, but I think in specific areas like the Miccosukee community, removing the residential preservation overlay for small-scale commercial and to help improve that area makes a tremendous amount of sense. So I was really glad to see that in this item. And with all of the focus on not just historic preservation, but really lifting up the history in that area and highlighting it and understanding the stories and documenting those, I think we've got an opportunity both in the history we capture and how we tell that story, and frankly with the recreation, like biking, that this could be a really nice area that attracts local folks, but also visitors to this area, and that's something that would help the community in Miccosukee, but also our entire county. So I'm really excited to see that component here. I know I say this every time, so forgive me for a broken record, but this is a special place in my heart because it was my first school out in Concord, and so I'm incredibly excited about this. I can't wait for the first community festival out there. And with that, I just wanted to ask a couple of questions. This gets really into the details, but I'm glad you all noted the historic cemeteries in the area. And I know working with some folks in District 5 on historic African American cemeteries, the vegetation is historically significant at times, things that have been planted in that area. And I know the state has some resources there too. So Mr. County Administrator, I know you mentioned working with FSU and FAMU on this. I wonder if drawing on some of the state resources may also be helpful in those specific areas. I know that they'd be partner on, designate a particular facility or something like that, but on the cemeteries, that's really of interest, and there's some unique aspects within African American, cemetery historically that we need to be sensitive to. It also brings to mind, there's an NPR project, the StoryCorps, and capturing stories. This has come up for me, whether we're talking about Smoky Hollow or other places, a way to document the stories of local residents. The last thing I wanted to ask about was something, and Andy Johnson led a great meeting. Commissioner Proctor and myself were there with the Department of Agriculture during our NACO visit, asking about funding for the community center and other things. And Andy, I know, or Mr. County Administrator, I know you all are probably doing research for other funding sources. I'm glad CDBG is on the list. But one of the things that was highlighted was that Miccosukee community is not a designated census tract area. I believe we only have one, which is Woodville. Is that right, Mr. County Administrator? I'm sorry. Woodville is our only designated census tract area within the county?
That I'm aware of right now, but the upcoming census, of course.
Could change that. Well, I had a conversation briefing wondering if we wanted to look at this. I don't know much about the rules or how we might go about designating a census tract area, but there's a lot of funding that we learned about in DC that is available should you have an area that's designated. And if we're looking at the 2020 census, it might be timely and in our interest to do a little study about that and see if it could provide more resources for Miccosukee in the future should we designate that area in the next few years. So, Mr. Chair, this again could be a separate motion or direction of Mr. County Administrator if you need that as part of the motion or if you all are already looking at it.
I think, as you noted, we're on it, but it's very good guidance, and it's something that we'll probably just bring back before the 2020 census as we're getting ready to start that process.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
All right, this is exciting, and again, I look forward to it. Thank you all, and thank you all for participating in it.
Mr. Bratton?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is truly one of the areas where citizens are emotional. I can scarce think of another area where the velocity of emotion is more intense than in Miccosukee. It really is. They love the place. But I think that the value of property over the years has gone up and increased much greater than the value of income of persons who continue to own the property. And when your great-granddaddy or granddaddy left you more than what you can handle, afford to keep, before we modernize and create a New Testament on Miccosukee and agree that this is going to be the New Testament guiding Miccosukee henceforth, there ought to be, President Obama had something called the Pathway to Citizenship, a grace period that, get right with government, get right with this. We need a pathway to freedom, a pathway that people, before we seal this New Testament, that we allow those persons to be released from and to get out of because they can't go forward under this. Maybe if we had a 6-month window, going back specifically to Commissioner Dozier, what you're saying, that people who are down there for the 3rd and 4th generation, we need to relax that 1 in 10, and if they want to get out, give them a 6-month window to get out, get out, get out. There was a movie called Get Out. Let them get out, and then roll forward. But it's got to be a year of jubilee somehow, that you just can't continue to hold that iron brace up against people who can't afford it, but you don't want to let your granddaddy down. Can't let your great-grand, because you know what, they struggle to keep it. But honestly, if there was some way of dignity and you could get a fair market value without giving away your whole inheritance and legacy, I think we have to think in this area, and specifically this area is unique because it carried so many families from slavery era, plantation era. It has a unique part of our history that if we're intellectually honest, we would recognize that what many people receive, they need relief from it, but they need to be able to do it without giving away their whole birthright. That's all I'm trying to say, and I hope that we can incorporate that historic awareness into why we should have a period in which we can make a judgment for those older families. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I have no more commissioners in queue to speak. Motion on the floor is for options 1, 2, and 3 made by Commissioner Lowe, seconded by myself. All those in favor of the motion on the floor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0.
Can we get a break?
Yes. Let's take a quick 15-minute break. We'll be back in 5 minutes. Okay, 5 minutes. 7 minutes. We'll get right back into it. I do have a quorum of commissioners, so we'll get right back into it. I believe right now we're on item number 5. Mr. Administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This item provides the board with a status update on the development of projects programming for the Livable Infrastructure for Everyone program funded by Blueprint 2020 sales tax infrastructure improvements outside the urban services area. We will, again, commissioners, not be collecting the dedicated 2% of the sales taxes until 2020. However, upon approval of this item, we will begin our program development, and that's what we wanted to discuss with you today and present to you today. This is a very exciting opportunity for us, and Tony could talk a little bit more about this, but obviously you all will recall during the sales tax deliberations and all of the good work we've done in providing public infrastructure, some of it very big and transformational. In that process, the elected officials identified that while all this was very good and exciting, that there were pockets of our community that didn't have basic infrastructure, and that that was something that the policymakers wanted to be sure to address in the sales tax. And again, we did that through the dedication of the 2%, about $1 million a year, whereby we will be able to begin to address some of these things. And so what we've done leading up to now is to, again, show you out-year forecast of what project programming could look like. Again, upon your approval today, we will begin to develop program criteria in these categories and bring those back to you, which you'll see reflected in your future budget discussions and again, in the upcoming years. But we took this opportunity and asked staff, primarily with Tony Park taking the lead, to identify the highest needs in the unincorporated area, in the rural areas. Among those before you, you can see what we're calling a rural road safety stabilization program. We just discussed the Miccosukee sense of place, street lighting, fire safety improvements, boat ramp enhancements, stormwater and flood relief, addressing some recreational amenities, again, that perhaps have seen some deferred maintenance and that sort of thing over the last few years in some leaner times. But again, the detail of which is included in the analysis and the out-year program is reflected in Table 1 before you. With that as a very broad overview, I'd like to ask Tony at this point. Tony, do you have anything to add?
Yes, sir, Vince, and thank you. Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, this really is a great opportunity for us to really address some long outstanding issues throughout our rural community. There's subdivisions that need culverts replacements, drainage improvement, flooding issues, fire safety issues. I think it's just an opportunity as we go forward in the future to really go back and look at those older subdivisions that before we had the land development codes that we have today, that we can really truly address. And really these programs that we are working on, we'll continue to look at projects, and as projects come up, we'll evaluate them against our policies and criteria. And it really is a grand opportunity for the county to deal with.
With that, Mr. Chairman, we're happy to answer any questions about any of the categories before you. And again, we'll take it where the board would like to do so.
I'd like to move options 1 and 2.
Second. Options 1 and 2 has been moved by Commissioner Lindley, seconded by Commissioner Proctor. I have Commissioner Proctor in queue to speak.
I'm excited about this. There's no need to linger to Tara here. This is a great step. Our staff saw the light on this when we were negotiating during the penny sales tax, and what they saw now is crystallized for all of us to see. So we support this.
Thank you so much. Commissioner Proctor and Vice Chair also spoke on this program as well to talk about how proud he was and how much he was looking forward to it. I bet you the folks in Fort Brayton are very much looking forward to seeing this program prosper. And so with that being said, I have staff recommendation moved by Commissioner Lindley, seconded by Commissioner Proctor. All those in favor of the motion on the floor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries without objection. Move on now to item number 6, Mr. Administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask Wanda to join us at the table for this item. Commissioners, you recall, as requested by the board on January 23rd at your commission meeting, you all specifically asked that this budget discussion item be presented for your consideration for one-time funding of $50,000 from Big Bend Crime Stoppers to support its Report Crime initiative. Commissioners, since you asked for this item to be included, again, we're seeking your direction on this item. It is not currently included in the tentative budget. With that, we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
All right, I have Commissioner Daly and Commissioner Dozier in queue to speak. Commissioner Daly, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm going to make a motion for option number 1. I appreciate them going through the budget process. Staff has brought us a balanced budget. This fits into that overall vision of this fiscal year. So I move option number 1.
Second.
Option number 1 has been moved by Commissioner Daly, seconded by Commissioner Proctor. I have Commissioner Dozier in queue to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Daly, I agree. This is a good program. I appreciate the efforts from Sharon and others to really engage with us and work with our staff on this program. I have a bit of a concern right now, though, that there are a multitude of programs that could help address current needs. It's come up several times today, certainly with the training facility with Leon County Sheriff's Department and others, and we're looking from top to bottom, whether we're talking about children's programs, to economic development, workforce development, to increase resources and how we work with our law enforcement partners to address the crime rate and the associated impacts on our community. And Big Bend Crime Stoppers is one piece in that puzzle. I am not convinced yet that in a limited budget, this is the one place that we should allocate dollars without a broader assessment. For example, we just approved the grant for Ready for Work at a few county commission meetings ago. I know the PSCC is still looking at other options there, and we have all, or several of us, have mentioned work with law enforcement or state's attorney office or others on various components of the, how should we say this, the continuum from folks being in the system and trying to get them out of the system, reentry programs, whatever that might be. So for me, recent work with Sheriff McNeil and his staff and others focused specifically on a reentry portal or a better way to coordinate the resources that folks need when they leave the detention facility or the prisons in our area and return to our community has been lifted up as a critical need. And we have seen some improvements in the collaboration and better understanding of what those needs are. And as I read this item, even though Big Bend Crime Stoppers is doing a great job for our community, I can't support this item at this time until we look at the bigger picture. Again, I'll just wrap it up here. We have limited resources and we're doing a lot, but I think there are other programs that may be of higher need, and I wouldn't want to deplete our resources at this point before looking at that. So whether or not we want to look at that during this budget cycle or after, I'm open to discussion about that, but I do think we need to drill down and look at those various components before we allocate any more funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Dozier. Commissioner Lindley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Dozier, I agree with you. I know that the program has been a pretty good program going on. The money is to increase rewards and remove some limitations on rewards. I just think we have a lot of other programs that are addressing this, and also, quite honestly, our concern is largely on the counties, the unincorporated areas. The city of Tallahassee is supporting this. The sheriff's office is supporting this financially, and so I won't be supporting it, and I would make a substitute motion for item number 2, which is to not include this in this year's budget.
Substitute motion has been made by Commissioner Lindley for option number 2, seconded by Commissioner Dozier. I have no more commissioners in queue to speak. A couple of clarifying, I think you spoke on this, but jog my memory real quick. I think we had asked that Big Bend Crime Stoppers go to, I think you might have said this, but go to PSCC to ask to apply for that funding, correct?
Correct.
And I think in the item, I think you said as well that they did not apply for that funding?
Correct.
Did they give us any reason why they did not apply for that funding?
They did not.
Have we spoken to them on this specific agenda item to hear, any reason why we should support it? Or, I mean, I just, the board specifically gave instruction for them to go and apply for that pot of money, and I feel like we should be given a reason why they didn't, especially if they wanted us to contemplate it in the budget. So, I mean, I have a couple of unanswered questions when it comes to that. All right. I have no more commissioners in queue to speak. We'll move to the motion. Substitute motion for option number 2 is made by Commissioner Lindley, seconded by Commissioner Dozier. All those in favor of the substitute motion on the floor indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-3 for us not to entertain it. Those in dissent were Commissioner Daly, Commissioner Proctor, and myself. The only question I had related to it was more of one of continuing it. Mr. Administrator, could we have, and it's taken up now, so that's not, I just wanted to hear from them why they didn't apply and what the reasoning was. But could we have continued it to the next budget?
Certainly. Should the board provide any direction further down the stream in the budget, we'd be happy to bring back any budget discussion items that the board would like to address again later.
Okay. Well, look, show option 2 is passed with myself, Commissioner Proctor, and Commissioner Daly in dissent.
And I would like to see them come back again with more explanation of what their program is about and just go the regular budget route. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on now to item number 7.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As required by Leon County fiscal policies, this item provides an analysis of the current outside agency contracts, mid-year performance reports, and seeks consideration of establishing your FY19 funding levels. This item specifically, Commissioners, as you will recall, is on the agencies which we have a contractual relationship with to provide specific services. You will recall that this board has made it very clear over the years that you'd like to see these contracts come back each year with any analysis or any recommendations that that staff might have relative to continued funding or not. You'll see that we've recommended level funding for all agencies except for 2 recommended changes. 1 we've already addressed in the trauma center, and 2 involves the sharing tree for a proposed reduction from 20,000 to 10,000, and that has really more to do with some duplicative efforts with the county and phasing out of the sharing trees funding over time. With that, we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Is there a motion for staff recommendation? Staff recommendation moved by Commissioner Deloge, seconded by Commissioner Dozier. Commissioner Proctor, you were in queue, but I don't know if you were in queue to speak or if you were just in queue from last.
Chairman, I wanted to, I was unclear about staff's recommendation. We're on number 7, right?
Yes, sir.
I think that the Commission on the Status of Women and Girls, I would like to see us reach a funding level this year, at least $35,000. They initially began with a pittance, which we initially funded them. I think we had 20. But I'm just not happy that we're merely, see how much money you got controls how much productivity you will have. And if you only give somebody $20,000, you're not expecting a whole lot. I think we should up that. It says to us our expectation is greater. It says that our support for the ministry of their outreach and what they're doing. And it also signals an increasing, intensified interest, awareness, and appreciation from our board for the works that they're coordinating for women and girls in our community. This is why I'm asking the board if we would, unless it's going to take food off the table or something of the county, but that we up that by $15,000. They're doing great work. They have excellent, reliable, upstanding, talented women who are giving their hearts and souls to this work. And I think that I would feel better if in our hearts from somewhere this body could actually do that this year. I would also like for staff to take a look at our support for this village. And they're increasingly challenged with numerous, I don't use the word obligations, but they contract with what they get. But they continue to be at the forefront of areas including mental health. I think that they're going to be one of the anchor partners in mental health. They're not complaining. They hadn't talked to me. They hadn't lobbied me at all. But I am aware and keeping an eye on the good cutting edge work. I'd like to see our consideration for this village to 250 if entertained this year. Legal services, they're a bunch of lawyers. They can argue and stand up for themselves. I'm okay there. This body has been content that the Wildlife Association could get $71,000, and God knows that I don't have anything against wildlife. A couple of people have said that I'm a pretty wildlife myself, and I disagree. But when you think about the wildlife getting $70,000 and our domestic violence coordinating council and all of that, the trees going to get 20, and I think if we give in the trees 20, that we certainly ought to be looking at Oasis for. So what I'm standing up for today, y'all, is that we do this village to 250, and I'm asking for the status of the women and girls to go to 35, and I just think that we got some stuff standing double up on wildlife. The girls and women ought to at least get half of what wildlife is getting. So that's why I'm benchmarking my ask to you on that right there. That's it. Can we make those? What do I need to do? I know a motion has been made. Ask the maker.
You can ask for an amendment, Commissioner Proctor. You can make a substitute motion.
Can the maker
is Commissioner Deloge.
Commissioner Deloge, is it within your capacity to allow $35,000 for women and girls and $250 for this village?
Since this is like the very beginning of this process, I'd rather get this forward and we can continue the discussion. I'm assuming nothing locks down. This is just kind of, because we do the dance all year long.
This would include, I want to just be clear, if you give us the direction, it will be included in your budget moving forward.
If we take the agenda item as it's been proposed in the agenda item without Commissioner Proctor's changes, I worry, my concern is we open up Pandora's box, and with all due respect, Commissioner Proctor, is the minute we start going down this path, there's really no end, because everybody's got nuances, and the best deals ever are the ones where most people get most of what they want, but not everything. And if we sat here and tried to work it out where everybody got everything, we'd be here for the next 3 weeks. I'm inclined to stick to the motion as it was made. And if we want to make some changes going forward, we can do that on an as-needed basis. But frankly, I'm not interested in just ad hoc starting to kind of move things around.
Motion will stay as is. Commissioner Proctor, you have...
I think that the going down that road, we are that road. And one of the things I like about Christian faith is that you don't get nothing. Because Jesus says that I am the way, I am the truth, I am the light. And when it comes to this particular money, we are the way, we are the truth, and we are the light. And don't nothing flow out of these coffers, except it comes through us. So whoever asks, we control it. It's up to us. And it was just like God. If he don't favor you, you ain't going to get nothing. I don't care what you ask. But you do ask. And so we're not obligated to every ask that comes to us simply because somebody asking. We get asked stuff all the time, every day. That's what half of these phone calls on a cell phone business is about, people asking you something. So it was just my thought of what I felt as a value statement of our body relative to trees, for what we give to women and girls. I felt they were worth half of what we do for trees. It was also my thought that in the work and interest of moving forward with mental health, that this village is taking. We are the body. We are the God figure here over this money that makes these choices. So it's not an outside consideration. It's what we ourselves council, caucus, and deliberate upon. So if it's not within the thought range of capacities of this body as a group, then I can't move the ball by myself, and I don't have a substitute motion to make.
Commissioner Dozier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will support the motion. I had not heard about any request for increase from this village, so if there was other material on that, I would happily look at that in the future. I'm sure others would as well, but I appreciate the information we have presented today. I did want to make one comment about the OASIS funding request, and appreciate Michelle Gomez, our relatively new executive director for OASIS, and administrator for the Commission on Status of Women and Girls, being here today. I served on, as a representative of the county, the strategic planning discussion group for the Commission on Status of Women and Girls in the last year and a half, 2 years or so. We wrapped up that process just before the former executive director left, and I do understand the challenges for OASIS Center staff for administering the commission, and I wasn't totally surprised by the increased funding request. But as I just shared with Michelle, for me, I haven't seen the implementation of that strategic plan and kind of a breakdown of where we are now with the commission. So while I'm going to vote for this motion and leave the funding as is, I just wanted to make that comment that she just told me that the commission is going to be looking at that strategic plan and working through that, and we may have additional information in the future. And again, like this village, I would be willing to consider any additional information and have that discussion at a later date. But I know with the transition, with any new director, and with a lot of moving components in both organizations, the timing may have not worked out to have that information for this meeting, but it would be important for me to see where the Commission on the Status of Women and Girls believes they should go in the future, and how the commission can best partner with the city and county commissions going forward before we move into any new structure. So just want to, again, make that comment, and I look forward to continuing the partnership and hearing where the commission is in the near future. Thank you.
Commissioner Broughton.
Chairman, we move forward with a item to place children's services before, I guess, the voters to decide. In the visioning of that, would that mean that something like Whole Child Leon would come off the table, and we wouldn't, if it passed, we wouldn't see them again, and would domestic violence come off? How would that impact potentially what we're providing now with the several millions of dollars which the Children's Service Agency might oversee and provide? I'm just curious about what kind of fit is that?
So I could only take a guess, but I'm pretty sure that the administrator could give us a more definitive answer. But my guess would be that anything related to children's services would qualify for that pot of money, and therefore could apply for that pot of money and go before that board. That would include Whole Child Leon, And from this list, really the only thing I see right now would be Whole Child Leon, specifically that applies, specifically that is for children and would be able to apply for the Children's Services Tax. Mr. Administrator, correct me if I'm wrong on any front there.
Mr. Chairman, the only thing I would add to that is that you're absolutely correct in their eligibility, but as we've advised in the past, just to be clear, there's nothing that would compel this independent authority to make any of those funding appropriations with those dollars.
Any other comments? Commissioner Dozier?
I heard that, but I didn't. Vince, I'm so sorry. I'm hearing you.
Sure. All I was saying was that we can't tell them what to fund once they're established. They will make those independent decisions. Of course, the board will have representation on that, and we'll have some influence relative to the establishment of their membership. But again, as we've advised earlier, they will be an independent body, and we as the county wouldn't have any ability to dictate, again, what they fund or to...
Who would staff them legally? Who would be their legal staff?
They would have their own staff. Put it this way, Commissioner Partner, if I could make a parallel, the city of Tallahassee has their own board, they have their own staff, they have their own organizations, and we can do little or nothing to influence anything that they do. The Children's Services Council will be the same way. They will have their own board, they will have their own administration, they will have their own everything. It will be their own organization. We will have a member on that board, but when it comes down to us, and I think we can make suggestions to the governor about who will be on that board, but even if the suggestions we make to the governor, if he sees someone else that he sees better fit, he can change our recommendation and put somebody else on that board. So our control over the Children's Services Council is little or none when it comes to our being able to control anything.
So what I heard Commissioner Dozier say, and I think I heard Commissioner DeLoach say, because is that arguments substantiating need a good argument. I heard she would be open to, and I think I heard Commissioner DeLoach say that this is just the first preview and it ain't the final. We're not tying a yellow ribbon around this today. So that being said, I walk out of the room believing that there still is possibility that the Oasis Center could be enhanced. Because one of the things that kind of irritates is when the $200,000 for the trauma center is taken off the books and they go down to zero for 19. So when we get to the trauma center, that decision was made by staff, in which we have already subtracted that money in a previous item to go to the EMS. Now, that was a decision I ain't had nothing to do with. In fact, this sheet of paper was printed before we had anything to do with it. So when you're spending money, we rubber stamping, and I ain't getting to spend no money. I'll make a recommendation about what happens differently here. And when we're going to take $200,000 away off this sheet of paper here, every last one of us ought to have something to say besides endorsing staff's idea that we just give a whole $200,000 away to the ambulance service. There are a lot more sources for, in fact, the $200,000 ought to be coming from TMH to the ambulance service. They ought to be given $200,000 at least, because they're the ones who benefit from where you're taking the people at. When you come to your house or my house, TMH is going to get the benefit and the value of getting paid for a free ride that we subsidize to the ambulance. Or they really ought to pay for some of them rides because they come to their doorstep to make money off of them. So I think that if we're saying that this thing is open I think that we can do better. And in particular when we are paying for the rides to a hospital that's making way more money off of what we subsidize, and they don't put nothing back into the transportation system to get people to them. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I have no more commissioners in queue to speak. Motion on the floor is by Commissioner Lowe, seconded by Commissioner Dozier. For options number 1 and 2, all those in favor of the motion on the floor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries without objection. We'll move on now to item number 8.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, we're closing in on it with only 2 items remaining, and I'm going to ask Maggie Terrio to come on up. This budget discussion item seeks the board direction related to including funding in the 5-year capital improvement plan for the design and construction of dog parks at the Leon County Parks and Rec facilities in the unincorporated area. This comes from your strategic initiative adopted at the board's retreat and made part of your 17 through 21 strategic plan to identify opportunities to create dog parks in the unincorporated area. Commissioners, as you can see, there's $30,000 per year to establish 3 parks, and that's in addition to the one which is already part of the master plan at Appalachia Regional Park. Maggie, do you have anything to add?
Sure, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'll go ahead and move the option number 1.
Second.
Maggie, if you don't mind. I
Option
think
number
you
1.
answered all of our questions and briefings. It's a great idea.
Option number 1 has been moved by Commissioner Daly, seconded by Commissioner Deloge.
Maggie's coming up at the beginning of the meeting next time.
I didn't get to use my cat park joke.
You just did.
Okay. Option number 1 has been moved by Commissioner Daly, seconded by Commissioner Deloge. We love our coochies. Commissioner Partner, you're in queue to speak.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, my daughter was calling me, and I always have to stop for that. Again, I think that women and girls, Oasis Center, the dog park, we're about to vote $30,000 for the dog park, and we're not even giving $30,000 to the women and girls. I have a problem with that, and I won't be supporting it. I can't support the dogs for 30, give the girls and women 20. So I'll oppose this. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment, Commissioner Partners. Commissioners, option number 1 has been moved by Commissioner Daly, seconded by Commissioner Deloge. Commissioner Daly again. All those in favor of the motion will indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Maggie, for that great presentation. Mr. Administrator, while we're at it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Another item very familiar
Before you go, Mr. Administrator,
Sure.
I just want to understand a few things. The Commission on the Status of Women and Girls is funded equally by the city and the county, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so any contemplation, have you heard of any contemplation of increased funding on the other side of the road?
I don't believe we've heard.
They've been asked. We haven't heard anything firm.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll move on to item number 9.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This item seeks your approval in considering using the $190,000 balance to the Deepwater Horizon oil spill settlement funds to install solar energy improvements on 4 additional county facilities. You'll recall that this comes at the board's direction the last time you dealt with this issue at a commission meeting not too long ago, and included in the materials before you, we have 4 small demonstration solar project proposed in this item to include the courthouse, transfer station, Northeast Branch Library, and the new planned restrooms at ARP. And with that, we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Commissioner Daly?
Second.
Option 1 has been moved by Commissioner Lindley, seconded by Commissioner Deloge. Commissioner Daly? Commissioner Dozier?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Quick follow-up to a great workshop in December, or not workshop, agenda item, robust update on our sustainability plan. So, Mr. County Administrator, Maggie, your team, I really appreciate your efforts to identify these areas. 2 quick comments. One, I feel much better about, you said it was bathrooms at Appalachia Regional Park versus a large-scale solar that was discussed many years ago. So I think that is a great idea for that location. And I just wanted to use this opportunity. We had a couple of paragraphs here about the climate action plan. And I've been hearing from community members and Sustainable Tallahassee folks about how excited they are and how much they have appreciated the work with Maggie and your, Ms. County Administrator, your team, Maggie, Tessa, others, and I think they have a meeting of the stakeholders perhaps this week. I'm really excited. I think this was, didn't get the fanfare that we might get at some other points, perhaps when this plan comes into fruition, but this is an enormous initiative. And the fact that we have the community coming together to work on this with our leadership and Sustainable Tallahassee is really exceptional. So just wanted to share those comments that I've received with the board and with our staff, and I'm really looking forward to the results of that plan. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Dozier. The motion on the floor is for option number 1 by Commissioner Lindley, seconded by Commissioner Deloge. I have no more commissioners in queue to speak. All those in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Mr. Administrator.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes your discussion items. We just have one outstanding issue. We want to make sure we get it right. On clarification, the Crime Stoppers item. Just want to make sure I got the board's direction right. If you wanted it to be included as a budget discussion item at your June workshop or not, there was some conversation.
The motion on the floor was for option number 2, which was for no further consideration, and so because that motion passed,
thank you. That's all we need. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Any comments from commissioners? Commissioner Dozier?
Got one, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to close out. Commissioner Proctor mentioned Whole Child Leon in reference to the Children's Service Council. I'm looking forward to our discussion on May 22nd and that agenda item coming back. But I did have some conversations with some board members, and they're fully aware that the contemplating a Children's Service Council could change the dynamics of funding in the future. But I think it may be good to raise that question and have a broader discussion about that on the 22nd. I think it was a decent question there, and as always, our staff is really fine-tuning and critically looking at all of our partnerships and contracts. So just wanted to make that comment, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for a great
Thank you. Any more commissioner comments? Great job. We'll get out of here at 11:40.